Okay. Hi, everyone. I am so excited to introduce you to Elise Houston, who I met through Elixology when we got certified in light field astrology. She's also a light field astrologer, and we've gotten to be good friends, huh? We've had some good
Having friends.
conversations, mostly about our neurodivergence, which is why I brought you on here. Um, because as a high masking, late diagnosed female autistic, you understand the mental hoops that happen and how you kind of lean into it and then you're like, but maybe I'm not. And you just kind of go back and forth. Both me and Elise have ADHD as well as autism. And Elise, actually, when I first got diagnosed, actually, I don't think I was diagnosed yet. I was considering it. I was strongly considering it. And then I had heard from Sarah Jones, I think, that you were also autistic. And she's like, you should talk to her. And so I thought it was so fantastic that I had two astrologer friends that were autistic. And it actually makes so much sense if you think about it, because we are going to be very drawn to the patterns that we see in the natal charts and how we can just kind of just, connect all the dots really, really fast with our brains and that ADHD, right? So anyway, so tell us a little bit about yourself. What are you doing right now?
So, to be upfront with y'all, right now I'm in burnout recovery. So I'm doing a lot, but there are not a lot of ways that you can work with me right now. So, some lower like back burner projects for me right now are I do own an image consulting business. I own Firebird Image, where I help people heal their relationship with their appearance, their image, how they come off,
Mhm.
which I feel like is relevant in some ways to this discussion, like the way
Absolutely.
people are perceived and the mask and
Them.
like approaching that topic.
Yeah.
It's complicated. It's way more complicated than like don't mask or like just deal with the mask. Like it's a complicated topic. So I love all things image and fashion and like beauty and just how we be in the world. I do work for Elixology. And so right now, a lot of my time and attention, the capacity that I do have, those spoons are being
Yes, the spoon.
used for students
Mhm.
in our programs. And so if you want to work with me that or like be in my space, that's probably the way right now to be in my
Mhm.
space. We just started a new cohort like a couple weeks ago. So I don't know. There may be if really, really calls to you, because I am who I am, I may be able to slide you in late. So you can certainly email me if that's like super, super calling to you. Um, but yeah, that's what I'm doing right now.
I love it. I love it. And just, your Aries sun, just busy doing all the things. Like, love it. But at the same time, I love that you are aware of your neurodivergence. And so you can kind of keep track of your battery, you know?
For
Um,
sure.
because I am getting out of autistic burnout because that's usually the time that women are diagnosed is they
Mhm.
experience autistic burnout. Finally, the masking, we just can't do it anymore. And so I was coming out of it, but then it's crazy how like I think, oh, I'm out of it, and then all of a sudden I'm back in it again. And it's just kind of this, it takes a while. It takes a while.
Yeah.
And I like to be busy, but then at the same time, I really like to just have my freedom of time. So it's interesting. But so let's talk about this. So, what brought you to astrology? What called you to astrology?
So, so really, I just have to tell you the story because they're the same story. So
Great.
the story that led me to autism is the same story that led me to astrology, is the same story that led me to like everything in my life. Because like, unfortunately, we do live in a world where children are diagnosed, and it's a problem, I feel, especially with the current way that it's approached.
Mhm.
When I was diagnosed as a child, that was not the case.
Mhm.
So I collected diagnoses in elementary school. So by the time that I hit the age of 12, I had already been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. There is
Too young.
the true familial precedent there, and so like I feel like there's a little bit more grace in my situation than just slapping that label on every woman who's actually autistic.
And
But
it's a
it was still not
problem.
correct.
It is a problem. I've been
It
doing a lot of
is.
research, and that seems to be a really common, that one in borderline, actually.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And it's like there is a duality with the situation I had growing up because both of my parents had their own struggles with their mental health. And that meant that they are traumatized, emotionally immature, and that caused its own wave of things. But at the same time, like I grew up in a household where, in a time where this was not socially acceptable yet. Like I grew up with a
Right.
lot of stigma. There was this understanding that, hey, we're different and that's okay. There's no shame in mental health struggles. We do whatever is necessary to take care of ourselves. We're not going to feel bad about taking medication when we need that. We're going to educate ourselves. We're going to do all the things. And so it's like, I was I grew up in an environment in my home life where it was talked about very frankly.
Hmm.
And it was, despite not necessarily being a healthy environment, we had pretty healthy attitudes around mental health. So my first encounters with stigma were outside the home because the world had not caught up by any means. So, like, by the time I hit the age of 12, right, I had collected the bipolar diagnosis. They did give me an ADHD diagnosis, which was correct and the only correct
The
diagnosis
only
out
correct.
of
Yes.
all of the things.
Yes.
I had also I want to trigger warning. So I will be talking about suicide a lot. I dealt with chronic suicidal ideation most of my life, my earliest memories, and I talk about it frankly and directly. I don't like to mince words, and I do also use dark humor. So I have a lot of reverence for where people are at.
Mhm.
Just know before you keep listening. Oh,
Absolutely. Like I said, your Scorpio is
right.
just perfect for that. So,
Right. Yeah. So my heart's here for you, and also we're just gonna be a little bit upfront about that. So also by the time I hit the age of 12, I had been like, as soon as I had already conceptualized suicide. I had had a psychiatric inpatient experience, which, as I know, most people I know have a really good experience in inpatient facilities. So if you need that, do that. My experience sucked.
hmm,
It was not a good time.
not good time.
And I got more incorrect labels there. They
Oh,
definitely were doing better than most, but they also gave me depression and anxiety and
yes.
like all of these other things. So I like carried all of these labels with me through from childhood through all of my formative years, not
Hmm.
really despite, when you get diagnosed that young and you're a neurodivergent, you just study, right? So I studied psychology starting from elementary school. I'm like, oh, I need to be proactive. I need to know my stuff. I need to be able to have
Wow.
competent conversations with doctors. Like my mom, bless her, would host CHAD events and like be really involved in like the educational side of things. So that was like really impressed on me, and I just studied psychology, though it did take me an embarrassingly long amount of time to realize that by definition, depression and bipolar don't coexist. You have one or the other,
Yeah.
right? So I just
Yeah.
kind of carried all of these labels with
Oh,
me. And
goodness.
because of the way that I was raised,
Hmm.
um, and my experiences at a super young age with just really traumatic, not okay stigma,
Hmm.
I was an advocate for other people. I grew up being the person who like would have the conversation in peer group in junior high and high school, being like, no, there's no shame in this. Like, let's talk about it. Like, let's compare medication. Hey, that medication is not for you. Say something. Like, you can change.
Mhm.
Like, you can't say that kinds of things. You don't know what someone is going through. But the juxtaposition was by the time I graduated high school, there was a lot of conversation shift in culture. And so ADHD was way more socially acceptable. Anxiety, depression was way more socially acceptable to have. But I was more private with the the bipolar part of things. So like
Mhm.
the more extreme and intense parts of my experience, I did keep a lot more private and hold close because those were the things that like as soon as people know, their opinion would change and they would treat you differently and just all of the things, right?
Absolutely.
So I feel like my 20s were interesting because I got married and that allowed me to actually start healing for the first time.
Right.
I understood that I was way more neurodivergent than I ever thought before, and that ADHD medication did not work for me. So I
Mhm.
started like proactively talking to other neurodivergent people, resonating with the autistic experience, resonating with the ADHD experience,
Yeah.
finding tribe, finding like tips and tricks and like lifestyle things, dietary things,
Right.
things that I could change. But I was not ready to claim that autistic diagnosis. I
Yeah.
was still just constantly struggling, like suicidal every few months, like barely hanging on to life. Just like I didn't think I was going to. My 20s were kind of hard because I didn't think I was going to live that long.
Oh goodness.
It's because I had been struggling with suicidal ideation my whole life, and it was like a constant battle, not like a one and done kind of thing. It's like, oh, head above water, and then we're back under.
Oh
Like
my
just
gosh.
constantly. I didn't make plans for my future because I didn't think I was going to have one.
Oh,
So then I found myself an adult. Like what?
what? I made it to my Saturn return. Yay!
Right. So my 20s were whack.
Yeah, for
In that way,
sure.
like floundering, starting college late, like just figuring out that college does not work for me. Like all of the things. And I
Mhm.
also, I was studying psychology in college. I really thought, I know this is like almost a canon event for many neurodivergents, but like I really thought I was going to get my PhD in psychology and become a research psychologist, and it didn't happen, and
It
that's
didn't.
okay.
That, yeah. No, so many of us study psychology. And I did behavioral science and family studies because I was
Mhm.
like, how do relationships work for crying out loud? Like, how do families stay together and how do I connect with people? And like, I didn't know.
Asian class in college was amazing. I know a lot of people hated that class, and I definitely got more out of that class because I was self-studying. But like,
Right.
yeah, I loved my college experience, and I got a general associate's degree out of it, and that's it, and that's fine.
Mhm. Yeah, no, it's good. It's good because we still study like we're in college. Like we study all the time.
Yeah. Learning is a lifelong thing, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So, so where we're at, like, they're also
Yeah,
So that really shifted a lot of things for me. The studying neurodivergence inside and outside of college, the keeping up on research and all of that, because I made lifestyle shifts that even allowed me to function in a college setting that really allowed me to function as a human being and
right.
to start doing and being and like figuring myself out. Um, but again, not quite, we weren't quite, we didn't quite have the picture of it.
Right. Right.
So in starting in like, I'd say it came on gradually, but
Mhm.
it got hard in 2019 and just got harder and harder and harder. Weird symptoms. Weird symptoms that I now conceptualize and understand as like spiritual gifts gone awry and like more woo
Mhm.
woo and psychic stuff waking up, but in like the worst way possible.
I know. It's crazy. This highly
It's
sensitive
like
nature.
hard science person. Like,
Mhm.
no, we have to be like observable. Like, observable psychology is the way to go. Let's talk
Right.
about behaviorism. Let's talk about things that we can prove.
Right.
Let's just very,
Mhm.
very on that side of things. And I had no answers.
Yeah.
Like, medication was like I was limping along on medication for 2 decades. Stopped
Mhm.
working. Just
Mhm.
straight up stopped working
Oh
at
my
all.
goodness.
Um, none of the nothing had answers. Like I
Right.
read the DSM-5, no answers. Like
Mm.
I was already so up to date on research, no answers. There were like some budding studies talking about like maladaptive daydreaming and things that were like almost but not quite.
Right.
But if I tried to sit down with like a therapist or psych and talk about it, they're like, I have no idea. Let me tell you, it is not a good feeling. I don't know if you've been here. I'm sure some of you have. It is not a good feeling to pay a crap ton of money and battle all of the insurance jumps and do all of the things that are extra hard because you have no spoons and you're neurodivergent to get inside the office of a specialist, a
Mhm.
professional, and for them to look you in the eyes and be like, wow, you're really good at this. You've done so much research. I think you know more than I do. Like, what am I paying you for? What am I paying you for?
That is so true.
It's not good.
True. They're always like, wow, you're really self-aware for an autistic person. I'm like, what is that supposed to be?
Please help me. That's not helpful. So it was very frustrating, and at the point, and like it just got worse and worse and worse to the point where I'm like, I feel crazy. I
Yeah.
know I am not psychotic, but I feel crazy. I am suffering. Nothing is working anymore. I That is probably the lowest I've ever been.
Right.
I literally did not know whether or not I was going to make it out alive. Like I I tend
Goodness.
to self-isolate in ways that are healthy and unhealthy.
Mhm.
Definitely more on the healthy side for me now, just for anyone who's listening and worried. Now it's healthy. And it just got bad enough that I was preparing people and I was roping people in, and I'm like, I just don't. We're running out of options,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
what led me to astrology.
There you go. You're just like, well, that was an option I was not expecting.
No. And to be clear, astrology didn't have the answers I was looking for. What happened was just I was in such a bad spot that I was compelled to be humble, to like I had been exposed to the woo-woo holistic stuff and it never worked for me before. So I'm like, I have no hill to die on. I mean, we're dying. Like I
Yeah.
just there's no quarter to have high ground. I'm
Yeah.
desperate enough to consider anything. I do not care if it's placebo. I don't care if there's not studies done on it. I want experimental. I'm willing to do anything. I'm willing to do anything.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
that that was 2021. So it was
Mhm.
a solid 2.5 years of just degradation. Um, I know a lot of people had a really terrible pandemic experience, but I think that that was one of the best favors that I could have been given was, hey, you don't have to do life in
Yeah.
society right now.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
everything is whack. Just go hibernate and stay alive and try to figure things out. It was great in that way.
For sure. I can totally see that. Yeah. Just like not as many demands on yourself.
Mhm.
Yeah. For
So
sure.
2021 was the year of big shifts because I did a few like intensive, more holistic therapies that shifted things for me so that any of the work from that point of time, it's like a turning point. Like
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
was doing stuff and it was barely, if any, helping. And then after that, anything I did actually helped. Like doing all of the things, like I was seeing progress, I was doing the work and it was working for the first time.
Right.
And so it started the big journey of healing and doing trauma work and doing all of the things in a way that was actually helpful.
Yeah.
And so that was June in 2021. And I know because that big therapeutic treatment, that was the last time I was suicidal. Like
That's
before
amazing.
and after. So I'm on my longest streak. By the time this episode is published, it will be 37 months
That is
suicide
gotta feel
free.
amazing.
It is. And it's like the longer it goes, the more grateful I am, especially since before I couldn't even go a full year.
Right.
Like there was not even making it to a year. And now we're at over 3.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah, huge. So
It's,
huge.
yeah. It's a really big deal. And if you are listening and you're still in the despair of it and you're not seeing the progress, like I honor that, and I just, that's such a hard place to be in, but please, 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 please do not give up, because when you find the things that work for you, you can radically change your life in a very short amount of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is just true.
It's so true. Oh,
Well, that
cry.
also allows me to taper off medication, so I'm not
Yes.
quite on the 3-year mark being totally prescription drug free. But that's awesome. And then
Elise,
like
that's amazing. Oh, that's
fall of
amazing.
2021 is
Oh,
also when I really like I had been having astrology in my space, reluctantly admitting there was something there, but not quite knowing where to learn, where to go. So fall of 2021 is when I found when I took Naomi's Astrology for Real connection class, because the current offerings were not there.
right.
And
right.
it just made sense. It
Yeah.
made sense
It
to
just
my brain.
clicks. It just does. Yeah, for sure.
All of the clicking. This is annoying me. Stripey. Okay. We're not stripey anymore, and that's better.
Yay!
Sorry for those who are listening.
The
light was
consultant
going
in her.
through my blinds and like leaving stripes on my face, and it was bothering me.
For sure. I didn't actually even notice. That's funny.
It's funny the things that like bother you sensory wise, and like, yeah. So those things also started my trauma work.
Yes.
And doing trauma work was what made the autism obvious.
Isn't
Because
that
it was
interesting? That was my experience too. Like, it was all hidden. Like that, this autistic, like my autism was almost like the exile part of me, you know? Like I was the most ashamed, I guess, of it. And I feel like it was just I just buried it. Yeah, that was my
because
experience
it's not
too.
all of the autism experience is not socially acceptable to display, and part of the trauma is the conditioning thing, is the people pleasing, is the self-betraying.
Absolutely.
To make your life work and survive, right?
Absolutely.
And so when you get out of that, you're kind of in some ways reclaiming that or allowing it to be seen. And also, when you're doing trauma work and you're seeing progress and you're seeing like nervous system regulation and you're seeing like emotional regulation and like all of these things, and then all of the rest of it that's not changing and only becoming more and more visible.
Yeah,
like,
for real.
That's when I was like, there's no way around this.
Yeah.
So 2022 is when I claimed that for myself. And I still had a ton of like feelings about it because I self-diagnosed, and I am still working through the medical trauma to get me a real diagnosis, which I know that I want, because of comorbidities.
Of course.
Because there are comorbidities that I want diagnoses for.
Of course. And that makes a lot of sense. But again, and for those listening, self-diagnosis is completely legit. We were just talking about this, especially if you are a female, an adult female, because there are so many practitioners that don't know what autism is in females. And I know I wouldn't have been diagnosed had I not gone to someone that knew autism in women.
And it's like, to be quite frank, I have never gotten help with neurodivergence, not in a holistic practitioner, I mean, comorbidities, but like not in a holistic practitioner setting and not in a psychiatric setting. And like I had 2 decades of frequent, constant, well, like wide variety of psychiatric setting. Like I just, there is so much that you can do for yourself and your life on your own that you just don't need a diagnosis for, a formal diagnosis. And like, so that's kind of where I'm in, is like part of it is I do want it for my own peace of mind and that little insecure part of myself. But like I haven't needed it yet because I'm doing so much on my own.
Yeah.
Or like I run into a thing, I go find the right person to work with about a thing, but I'm the expert on myself, on my body, on my brain. I know what works for me and what doesn't. I'm willing to experiment. You don't necessarily need that diagnosis.
No,
but I do
agree.
bring that up because I had like all of those mixed feelings in 2022, and you brought up Sarah Jones. She was the person who was like, oh yeah, totally, and just claim it, just go, like you're fine. Like, oh, the bipolar thing, yeah, grace. Totally.
It was a saving grace for me too, because she has both as well, and I was like, how am I supposed to do this? I said, Sarah, is it my grand cross, or is it autism and ADHD, or is it trauma? And she said, it's all of it.
Well, then it's both and, right? So I don't feel like you. Okay, I'm also currently studying medical astrology.
Oh,
I'm just
very cool.
At it right
very
now.
Cool.
But at this point, I just don't think, even with all of our pattern-seeking brains and talking to other neurodivergents about it, you can't look at a chart and be like, this is the chart of a neurodivergent. That's not how that works.
I don't think so either.
But you can look at a chart.
I'm going to pull up your
from the perspective of knowing that they're neurodivergent and be like, oh, this is so helpful.
Let's pull up your chart. Okay, here's Elise's chart.
This is my chart.
Elise is a Scorpio moon and a Scorpio rising, guys. This is a big deal for her, so let's just give her a round of applause here.
I was definitely well primed from a young age to talk about hard things like this. And I think the dichotomy of having so much Scorpio energy, but also having it be first house energy, having my sun be in Aries, I'm constantly navigating. Yeah, my north node's in Scorpio. It's pretty dominant, and it's all like
Pluto is conjunct your north node.
It is actually. I love having Pluto as my chart ruler, and I super love that stellium. And like there are pieces of it that are in exact trines with my Pisces placements. So I have like a chart that's very, very clustered, and there's not a lot going on outside of those clustered. You could say that it's extreme and it's very intense. And there are pieces that don't necessarily work together on surface level. And so a lot of that shows up in my neurodivergent experience. Like this energy, even in a non-neurodivergent people, would be wildly intense.
Yeah. So the other thing, oh, go ahead.
But like having pieces that don't necessarily work together and like so much intensity, that's something that as a neurodivergent, like seeing it in my chart, being able to like, no, I'm built this way, it's fine, has been very helpful. Seeing the how much is going on in Scorpio and how deep, way more deep and layered than most people have the capacity to feel, sense, recognize, navigating like the Scorpio perception, the Scorpio depth, the vulnerability, the layers, how, and like not understanding how other people cannot meet me there. They're just not built to meet me at the bottom like that.
Yeah.
And then like, but also having like the Aries energy and having all of the Scorpio stuff be in the first house, where I'm
Right.
like, oh yeah, like I'm an open book. You just don't know that there's like 3 series and you don't even get to know about them until you read the first book. And like
Totally. Totally.
having all of those things. So like my chart literally shows a lot of the things that I've had to navigate socially and like how I'm perceptive, what I'm perceptive about, what my initial response is, um, how it hurts, like the things to navigate, all of the communication stuff. That's my Mercury and Pisces. Man, I
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah. So I was looking at this
have.
and I've talked to a few neurodivergents that have Neptune in the third house. And I kind of wonder if that is, I mean, I don't know for sure, but like that brain fog and like not being able to get what you want to say out. I don't
For
know.
sure, there are different ways that okay, so if you're looking at a concrete manifestation of an energy, there's always going to be like 5 or 6 different ways that that can show up. And in
Right.
medical astrology specifically, they say you cannot make a diagnosis until you spot at least 3 things that are saying the same thing. So
Got
when
it.
we're talking about like the communication struggles and the not being able to use the words to say the thing and the being a little bit slightly neurotic about using the right words to say the things,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
Mercury in the 12th house, Neptune in the third, Mercury
Right.
in Pisces,
Right.
weird stuff going on in Gemini or Virgo, weird stuff going on with your Mercury. There's like a
Right.
wide variety of ways that can do that, but like yes, third house Neptune is for sure one of them.
Yeah, I would say so. And I have a Chiron in Gemini, so I kind of see that
Mm-hmm.
manifesting a little bit that way. But your Chiron in Virgo, like that would definitely affect your executive functioning.
Oh, yeah. The Chiron in Virgo has been very interesting, not the least of which because it's the only public piece of my chart.
That
Like
is, yeah.
there's nothing going on. I mean, technically I have my
You have,
South Node in my 7th house. I have
uh-huh.
Ceres in my 7th house if we were to look at
Right.
asteroids and things, but I just don't have a lot going on above the surface. The only thing that's viewable is my Chiron,
And you
is
have a
my
Leo
landing.
MC.
Uh-huh. And I think that's fascinating in the context of growing up as the scapegoat,
Hmm.
growing up as there is something obviously wrong with this person,
Mm,
navigating peer relationships, navigating stigma,
absolutely.
navigating employment abuse, and
Right.
like navigating it's all very public.
Hmm.
And it's not public as I'm very grateful that it's not public as in my wounds are on display,
Right.
but that people can tell.
Yes.
People can tell when I'm not doing great. They can tell. It's very visible for me. Like you can look at photos of me and see my journey in photos. And
Yeah.
I could not share my life story with you, but just by putting together a book, you would be able to intuit on some level what my life story is because of how visible it is,
I
both
see.
with that first house stuff, but also that Chiron being there, like my internal healing journey is very, very visible.
Interesting. Because yeah, I also have
Mhm.
Chiron in the 10th house. So
Mm-hmm.
that is yeah, my Cancer moon loves that. Not to mention my Cancer moon is in my 10th house too. I'm just like, oh, okay. Well,
It's hard.
let's
It's
just learn vulnerability, shall we? Let's just learn all about it in a public way. Like, ugh. Anyway, so I find it interesting that once let's is there anything else that you find that you have found some hope, ways to cope with your neurodivergence in your chart that you found?
in my chart, I feel like it's constantly. constantly, because I
True.
can't separate any part of my life from the neurodivergent experience. It's one and the same, right?
Gotcha.
And I'm constantly journaling to different players in my chart, constantly like pulling up transits, constantly
Mhm.
like collecting information from
Yeah.
which to conceptualize what is going on with me
Yes.
internally.
Yeah.
And astrology is just such a big part of that.
I
And
agree.
it's like at this point it's so deeply integrated. It's just part of my everyday life. I breathe this stuff now, and
Mhm.
like it's it can be it's a lot simpler for me to turn inward and use astrology as a language and a framework to be like, what's not working for me.
Right.
So in the context of autistic burnout, it's very interesting because when you're operating from survival mode and trauma brain, you it's almost like you under you underestimate how much battery you have
Right.
because you've never had it filled. So where I'm at,
No, truer words were spoken. Oh my gosh, yes. You think that you are running on a full battery, but you realize you've never, ever.
yes. So so I have just in the past couple weeks been like, oh, I'm in burnout again. And
Dang
then
it.
in like talking to my pieces, it feels very Lilith to me this time around, and very Chiron for me
Mm,
as I'm sitting with those pieces trying to navigate my life. And I realized, oh, I have been on low battery. Like for a month-long period, I was not getting above like 15% battery. Like we were on critical low
of
power mode,
course,
and
of
like I was
course.
having more meltdowns in like 3 weeks than
Yeah,
in the past year. Just super, super bad, like crying every single day. Like
yeah.
it was very, very messy, very
Hmm.
messy.
Yeah,
Um, and I'm like, how I thought I was meeting my needs, and like I'm like literally to the point where I can't meet my own needs and I need help, and that's frustrating because it's hard. Like as a neurodivergent person and as someone who is in the struggle, you are allowed to have other people support you. You are
yes.
allowed to have other people show up for you. You are allowed to have other people be involved in meeting your needs, and do not outsource your life and wellness to other people. And that's been like a struggle to be like, I cannot even see myself right now. I'm so burnt out. Like I can't even recognize what my needs are, let alone
Right,
meet them, because
right.
it's just so bad. And then I'm like catching my breath, and I'm feeling a little bit better, as like that was my last month,
Yeah,
going, oh, I thought full capacity was like 30-40%. And
right.
so I've been dipping for like a couple of years now, from like burnout to like getting to a third of the way full, burnout,
Burnout.
getting a third of the way full, and being like,
Yeah.
I feel so replenished. I have so much energy. Look at this manifesting generator go. And then it's like not true.
Right.
So I don't know
Yes.
how I'm going to 100%, but that's the current goals.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Do you feel like that your ADHD masks your autism a lot too? Do you feel like you
Yes.
coped with your autism with
Mhm.
ADHD?
Not the least of which, because if any of my peers were getting diagnosed with anything in elementary school, it was probably ADHD. And there weren't a lot of us yet.
Mhm.
But like I definitely grew up in the era of, oh my gosh, I'm so random and funny, I have ADHD. Like, and it was just like oh, the ADHD kid in the class is the one that everyone loves because they're so funny.
There, yeah.
And like all of that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, where there's just like a kind of surface level understanding of ADHD, and it was more socially acceptable. So
Right.
it was also easier for me to be like, this, and to be fair, it just, ADHD is going to cause a lot of problems in the current school structure. It just
Oh,
does.
it totally
That was what
does.
I needed
Yeah.
all of my accommodations for. And because I grew up, being like, definitely advocate for yourself, I'd be like, yo, I need this.
Yeah. No, that's really good. That's really good because just learning how to advocate for yourself and, like you said, involving other people in this is what I need. Um,
Mhm.
my Virgo sun and my Virgo ascendant are like, I don't need anybody. I'm good. Like I'll take care of it. But it has been a journey to learn to ask for help. But to and that's the thing too. I think that astrology is beautiful for the neurodivergent person because not only does it remind you of your needs because you can always like kind of go back to your moon sign and you can in relationships you can look at Venus and be like, oh, I need these things, and it can just like remind you because we forget what works. Like that's part of a neurodivergent brain is we forget what works. And what I love about it too is it's almost like this beautiful emotional management system. Like, don't you feel like that?
Oh yeah, for sure. So, there are definitely there are definitely places in the chart which tends to collect shadow. Like,
Yes.
come learn about it in the elemental certification program. But I
Yes.
also feel like the moon, the moon, our emotional selves, our emotional bodies, like we don't live in a world that's good at emotions. We don't live in a world where the majority of people are well-regulated, emotionally healthy people.
Mhm.
And it's knowing what your moon sign is, knowing what house, what's going on with your moon sign, being able to like turn to your moon and be like, what do you need? What do you need? What do you need? Like,
Exactly.
so helpful.
So,
So
yeah,
incredibly helpful.
I agree. I think it's a good place to start. I mean, that's how as I learned about astrology, and especially I learned my moon sign, that's what got me to my diagnosis, to be honest, is I realized, oh, I'm much more introverted than I ever thought.
Your entire natal chart is a huge permission slip.
It is.
Right? And as a neurodivergent person, you have probably never had permission to exist the way that you are and you were designed to be before.
I
Like
love
blanket,
that.
because even when people give you permission, they're not. They think they are, but they're misperceiving.
You're
And
right.
so you get trained and you train yourselves to kind of warp it and twist it into being some version that is easier for other people, easier to make life work, easier
Right.
to survive.
Right.
Your natal chart is like that. No, actually, this is who you are. You are allowed to be this way. You are allowed to have these needs. You are allowed to express this energy. And it's better. You can do
Absolutely.
it right. Like
Mhm.
let's really get clear about it in a way that you've never been able to see before,
I
so that
love
you
that.
can let the energy express healthily too, right?
Mhm.
So feel like feel like the natal chart is such an both astrology and human design. Knowing having these kind of maps and blueprints, especially as a neurodivergent person, is really really helpful to be able to navigate, like, it's a spectrum, where you are,
I
what
agree.
you need,
I love that.
who,
Mhm.
all of those things, and to just go for it. Like, you have permission to be it.
Ah, this was so fun. Thank you so much for being here. I want to do this again because I know there's so much more in that brain of yours.
For
And
sure. Yeah.
um,
I want to come back and talk about masking. Can we do
oh,
that?
let's do it. Absolutely. Because that is a fascinating topic. And
Hmm.
especially with Chiron and Gemini, I feel like that has really played in this kind of social chameleon and just feeling like I always have to be performing and putting on a mask. I feel like Chiron and Gemini is very much like that encompasses that.
And there's so much grief as a neurodivergent person with understanding that you learn to mask without like necessarily understanding the function of it. Like we go through this whole process of like, oh, light bulb, and then just grief with it, and then like, what am I supposed to do instead, and just grief with it, and like the
Yeah.
resentment
Oh,
and
for
the
sure.
anger and the frustration. And
Absolutely.
it's like, I think that there's more to the conversation to be had that's helpful than just awareness of, hey, masking. Watch your energy levels, watch there's more to it, I feel.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Mhm.
You got it, girl.
I'm so excited. But
All
yeah,
right.
I also love how neurodivergents are kind of gravitating to astrology the same way that we've like gravitated to science in the past.
Mhm.
The number of neurodivergent people who end up showing up in our programs and being like having these kinds of conversations, like us connecting with each other and with Sarah and like being able to see that, like
Mhm.
it's just very, very powerful stuff. I feel so strongly about it. Like this is a tool that I wish everyone could have for themselves, neurodivergent or not. But I feel
Absolutely.
like the importance only grows because I see neurodivergence as human adaptation, and that even though there has been a very long history of people not being diagnosed, that we're only going to see rates objectively increase until we all are. And so as we're figuring ourselves out and we're having these conversations and we're healing and we're doing the things and we're learning about it and we're like, oh, observing the patterns, like that's only going to serve future generations who are just all our neurodivergent children and
Yes.
their neurodivergent children.
All my three crazy, crazy children, which I love so much. And I am so grateful that I know, and I'm learning how to self-advocate so that I can teach them how to do the same. And
It's like one of the best gifts you can possibly give your children is your own healing. Is it not? Like
very
being able
true.
to show up as a regulated adult for a child, incredible, right? And so, as a neurodivergent person who likely has trauma, who likely has a dysregulated nervous system, who has all of this work to be
Mhm.
done,
Yes.
like having tools, having a map, having any kind of practically useful, legitimately useful information is just so helpful.
I agree 100%. And we'll make sure to put a link to, yeah, you send me a link for Naomi's course, her certification course,
Yes.
and I'll put it
Yes.
down.
And even if you can't get in now, please join our group. Please join the wait list. Like there are other courses that
Yeah,
we have in the meantime. I super, super love Astrology for Real Connection. That's
that
where
was a
I
good one.
started.
That's a good one. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I do have links for those too. Um, I do I do also have other practical tips. So, fun fact, I said that like earlier in my journey when I'm like, oh, I need to learn from all of the other neurodivergent people because I need to make my life work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I started collecting lifestyle tips, like small things to make your life work
Yeah,
from
for sure.
people. And
Mm-hmm.
then as I'm like, I'm going to collect these and I'm going to organize them so that I can deliver them to the neurodivergent population as like a group of tips rather than having to go on the hunt yourself. And guess what? I have still never finished as a project
That's
because
okay.
I'm
You're
neurodivergent
a
too.
neurodivergent. Yay! Unfinished projects. All good. It's all
But
good. But maybe this will motivate you because we want that
maybe
link.
maybe so. Because like I do feel like I'm a wealth of knowledge, not just from my own experience,
Mm-hmm.
and which experience has been much more conscious and self-aware than most even neurodivergence because I was put in a psychology space so
Yes, you
early. I've
were.
never lived without it.
Absolutely. I can totally see that.
But but
Oh my
yes,
goodness.
I would like.
This was so fun. I'll get back together, or we'll get another episode going, get the links, and thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.